איפה הרב? מישהו יודע איפה הרב? כמה זמן? אני רוצה לדעת כמה זמן נדבר. Okay, so welcome everybody to our next live broadcast with Rabbi Ginsburgh, who will be here hopefully very soon. And I thought that this month rather, we do a little recap of the previous. Oh, so I don't even have to do a recap. He's here. We're just waiting for him to come up. So I'll take the opportunity to wish everybody ksiva v'chasima toiva, should have a good and sweet year. And it'll be just a moment before the Rav appears. The next class will be on the 7th of October. It will also be a Sunday, 6:30 p.m. here in Israel and 11:30 a.m. in New York. So maybe I will say a couple of words. The last class, the Rav began a topic on theories of truth. And basically he's taking the 5 major theories that have been around since the time of Plato pretty much. And last month he gave us a synopsis of 2 of them. The first one was the correspondence theory of truth, which basically says that a sentence that you utter, that you say, or in Hebrew, a mishpat, is true if it corresponds to reality in some way. And he went over 3 different conceptions of what reality is. The correspondence theory of truth says that you have to be a realist, you have to believe that there is a reality outside of your head. But there are 3 different ways of looking at reality, which we saw corresponded to the 3 worlds: creation, formation, and action. That was the first theory of truth that he went over. The second one, and I think he's here, was the coherence theory of truth, which basically says that a system is true if all its representative parts are coherent, meaning they don't contradict one another.
Good afternoon, good morning in America. So as we just heard, we're going to continue on the topic of truth, which pertains especially to Rosh Hashanah, to the new year. Before we blow the shofar, we say Rosh Hashanah, we can use the word as truth. Explain in Chassidut the difference between Nisan and Tishrei, that Nisan is Emunah, is faith, and Tishrei is truth. In Hebrew, they both come from the same root. So we began a in the topic of truth, we began to talk about different philosophical theories about truth. We said that in general today one speaks of 5 substantive truth theories, 2 of which we began to discuss the last time: correspondence, coherence. And we mentioned the other 3, but now we have to a little bit elaborate on the remaining 3 theories of truth. With that we'll begin our discussion today. At the end of the last class we talked about pragmatism, the pragmatic view of truth, just very in short. And the idea was that if something is true, it must work, it must have an application. It must be effective in reality. According to pragmatism, truth is a value. We talked about values and good. It's a quality of value that the better it is good for. We're talking about good. We're saying that it can either be intrinsically good or they're good for something. Like, what am I good for if I'm good? And the value of truth is how good it is, meaning how good it's for something. How effective it is in the real world. Many scientists are pragmatic. Feynman, a very great, well-known Jewish scientist, was a pragmatic in his philosophy of science, and he said that things can only be proven to be wrong. You can never prove something to be true. So what does that imply as far as truth from a pragmatic view? It means that truth is something which is continuously in a state of being self-corrected. That's the term. We talked about coherence last time. We talked about self-fulfillment. There are 2 principles that relate to self. Either a person is driven by a desire to fulfill himself, and to fulfill means to be complete, which is to be coherent. We talked about last time. There's another mental view and direction, that a person is always conscious of the fact that he might err. There might be an error in his understanding of reality and his relation to reality. And he's always trying to correct himself. It sounds like a form of tshuva, doing tshuva. Once more, I can never know for sure that I'm right. There's no such thing as being right. I can just always be concerned and worry that I'm not wrong. Many great Torah scholars have this mentality, that everything is tzorichin. Everything has to be investigated more and more, to be well-tuned, like a musical instrument, always tuning it better, more precise and more precise. That type of mentality and philosophy pertains to the pragmatic understanding of truth. And it's always self-corrective. This will now help us to place this theory in correspondence to one of the sefirot, one of the divine channels of creation. We said that the 5 theories can be seen to correspond to the attributes of the heart. But there are 7 attributes of the heart. So how do they correspond to the attributes of the heart? The theories of truth. The first one that we discuss, which is the most ancient and the most still the most popular theory of truth, which is the correspondence theory of truth. We said that actually it has in it 3 different elements or dimensions, which are the first 3 emotive powers of the heart. Because it's the relationship between a subject and a predicate, which is an object, and the sentence or the proposition that is the truth bearer. We said that we explained that the subject, the I, who is the believer in the truth, is the sefirot of Gevurah and Kabbalah. And the predicate, which is the object, I'm saying something, making a statement, some statement about something, about this table. That something is chesed, loving kindness. We all explained this in truth, in more in length and depth. I'm not just reviewing it. But the statement itself, which is the truth bearer, is the statement truth, the proposition truth. That's tiferet, as the verse says, titen emet liYaakov. Truth is given to Jacob. Jacob is the sefirah, the power of tiferet, the middle line, the synthesis between subject and predicate. And then when we spoke about the second theory, which is coherence, we said that that corresponds to yesod, to the brit, the foundation. We said that the philosophers identify that with self-fulfillment. And self-fulfillment in Kabbalah is explicitly the property of yesod, which is called all, wholeness, that all, everything should fit together perfectly. We explained the difference between a mixture and a compound. And ideally, all of our worldview, which is all of our belief system, should be a total, whole compound that is like a living organism that procreates because it's all one and all alive and all coherent. So the coherence we identified with Yesod. What about pragmatism? Pragmatism is very simple to identify because if something works, it must have to do with those sefirot, those powers of the soul which have to do with action, with putting something into action. The first of which, and the primary one, is netzach. So we'll identify now the pragmatic view of the truth as a property or reflecting the sefirah of netzach. We're sitting here in a place which is called Netzach Yisrael, so it must be a pragmatic truth here in this room that we're now sitting. What does Netzach mean? It means eternity, but it also means victory. He said that this truth system is always correcting itself, always concerned about maybe it's wrong, or always being presented with some possible Aufschlag is the term in Yiddish. When you're learning Torah, somebody can come and contradict you. Just with one little word, you built a whole construction. We'll continue to talk about constructions. And just one little thing is wrong, the whole building, everything that you constructed mentally, all of your truth falls apart. So what does it mean? It means that the truth a very deep chap conception. The truth is actually a struggle. It's a struggle to survive, like the survival of the fittest. Because it's always liable to contradiction. Once more, just as he said, that I can only be proven to be wrong. I can never be proven to be correct, to be truth. But I do believe in certain things, and I'm always trying to stay up to date. And the final line is that it has to be good for something. It has to work in the world. It has to have an application. Today, all of technology has to do with application. From WhatsApp to on. Everything is just some big WhatsApp. So WhatsApp is pragmatic vision, view of truth, of what is true. If this pragmatic theory of truth has to do with Netzach, so Netzach has a companion power, a companion sefirot, which is hold, which also should have some pragmatic value to it. So actually, the next theory that we'll now discuss does relate also to pragmatism, but it's not pragmatic. It's not called pragmatic theory of truth. It has a name by itself, which is very easy to understand. It's called consensus. And consensus means that what the majority of the public agrees upon is true. The pragmatic value is very clear that if the public agrees upon something, the majority of the public, like, goes to the polls, and according to majority rule, the winner becomes the next president. So we hope that that will be a good choice of the public, and that will have greater pragmatic value. The deep understanding of this theory sounds to be very arbitrary. Just what everybody thinks should be, who says that it's true, maybe it's false. The deep understanding of this theory is just like, as we discussed last time about the proposition, that the proposition, according to the first theory of correspondence, the proposition itself is the truth bearer. It means that the truth is not in my belief, and the truth is not in the corresponding reality. The truth is in the statement, above which is an abstract proposition. The proposition is called the truth bearer, the middle of the three elements in correspondence theory. In consensus theory, the truth is what everybody agrees upon, or what most people agree upon. So the truth bearer is the agreement itself. It's also a profound thought. Where does the truth lie? As we said before, it seems totally arbitrary to say the truth is a function of majority opinion. But there must be something even mystical about majority opinion. That majority opinion creates some plane upon which resides truth. Just like in the correspondence theory, the truth resides on the statement. So here, according to this theory, the truth itself resides upon the state, the common state of agreement mean that no one individual possesses the truth. Just like before, in correspondence, the truth was not in my belief, it was not in the objective external reality, it was in the statement, in the word. So here the truth is the agreement, that the fact that people agree. First of all, it's a pele, it's a wonder that people agree, that many people agree to the same thing. So, since it's such a wonder that people, especially Jews, it's even a greater wonder that Jews can agree upon something, that's where truth descends. Truth is like some Shekhinah, divine presence. And it descends, it resides on agreement. Even the word agreement is a very interesting word in Hebrew, haskama. The first two letters of the word haskama are 65, which is the way that we pronounce Hashem's name. The four-letter name Yud Kei Vav is pronounced Adnut, Adni, which equals 65. The four letters themselves is 26. 26 is 2 times 13. 65 is 5 times 13. They have a common denominator. But the last three letters of the word Haskama also equal exactly the same number, 65, meaning that the 5 letters of Haskama, if you read it in Hebrew, the 5 letters equal 5 times 26. It's divided into 2 65s, and it's 5 letters, and it's 5 times 26, means the average value of every letter of this word agreement is Hashem's essential name, making something very, very holy about the very concept agreement, to agree upon something. Now, in a different place in a long essay regarding levels of the decision-making process, that there are 10 different levels of decision-making. I will not now go through all of them. One level is called haskamat hadat, that internally a person agrees within himself that before you make a decision, there are opposing forces in yourself. Yes, to marry this girl, or not to marry this girl. So one of the stages of making a decision is agreeing in yourself between your two opposing opinions. You have to come to an agreement. That level of agreement is the hod of the decision-making process. As part of the decision-making process, a whole parzuf. Parzuf means that it's a series of 10 stages. This is a whole great topic by itself. And the 8th of the 10 stages, which corresponds to the 8th sefirah of the 10 sefirot, is called haskamat hadat, the agreement of that, that you come to a satisfactory agreement in yourself. That corresponds to this, just to explain that the concept of agreement to agree is in hod. Why is agreement hod? Is hod means to acknowledge. That's the meaning of the word. As we said before, it's a pele, it's a wonder that people agree. People agree not because everybody initially thinks the same, but because there is a power in the soul to be done nekaf zchut is the term in Hebrew, that people do at some level want to hear and accept what other people think, not always to fight. Right? Netzach, which is victory, is a struggle to survive. But hod is, in a certain sense, a desire to to agree, a desire to create a communal consensus. Exactly what the name of this theory is, the consensus theory of truth. So that's why this theory, we place it in hold as the companion of the previous theory, the pragmatic theory. It also is sometimes referred to as itself being pragmatic, as we mentioned before. Another very important thing about this theory of consensus in a public, in a community, is that consensus creates what's called a worldview. And if you do not agree with the consensus of the public, then you are in a different world. You are in a different world. You are not in our world. This is exactly the terminology that's used. Once more, consensus creates a world, not just as a metaphor, as a reality. As we said before, just like truth resides upon agreement, the fact that so many souls agree upon something means that that very agreement is creating a world. In Hebrew, especially in the way it's used in Yiddish, so you say that der Elam sagt. What does that phrase mean? Der Elam sagt. Literally it means the world says. What does it mean that the world says? The world is what everybody says, that people agree upon. It's the consensus of opinion. So this is exactly the way it's explained in this theory, that the consensus of opinion is the world. And if you are not part of that consensus, you are just in a different world. The most important example that in this theory that's brought about two different people living in two different worlds. They can be next door neighbors, or they can even be in the same home. But they're totally in two different worlds. The example is a religious person versus a secular person. That's the example that is brought. A religious person believes, this is the terminology that is used, that metaphysical reality affects the physical world. Meaning that metaphysical reality is a part of his world. It's there. And we just, instead of using the term metaphysical reality, we'd say God. But the term that is used is metaphysical reality. Is there such a thing as metaphysical reality? Does it pertain, does it affect down here, our world? So a religious-minded person is in a world view that, once more, we could just simply say that God is here, God exists, and everything that happens depends upon God. A person that is in a secular worldview does not have that plane of metaphysical reality affecting the physical world at all. So it is very easy to see that he's in a totally different world. He's someplace else. The mission of our generation to bring Mashiach is to unite these two worlds. But the philosophers don't speak about uniting these two worlds because they're pluralistic. They don't really care. They just want to define things according to their own worldview. And they simply tell us that consensus creates a world. Now the fact that there are different worlds also is a concept that pertains in Kabbalah to hold. Because as soon as you acknowledge something, hold means to acknowledge, which is just like to agree. As soon as you acknowledge something, you become part of it. The prat, the detail, the particular, the individual becomes part of the whole. And if you leave that communal world, so you fall out of that space, and sometimes it can be very dangerous. It's called hodine pachalay l'mashchit, is the term, is the phrase. That my acknowledgement in Hebrew also means majesty. It's really used as an idiom together with splendor. Simply falls apart. I fall into a different world. But I'm not yet in the other world. So in the interim, it's a danger zone. That's a property of Hod, of the sefirot of Hod. So once more, the simple identification of where consensus belongs is very easy in Kabbalah. Because consensus is the meaning of the word Hod, to acknowledge. But now we gave a little bit more elaboration of how it's used, how it's applied. In the Gemara and the Talmud, we don't have exactly the expression of der Elam Zogt, of what the world says, but there are similar expressions. Mada Amadabar, what people say. The very, very frequent saying in the Gemara, things that people hold by. Since it appears in the Gemara and the Talmud, it means that there's truth, that it's truth. So that expression says, Puk chazi, ma'amadabar, go out and see, go out on the street and hear what people are saying, what people think. That is truth. So what theory does that come from? It comes from this theory, which is called consensus theory. What's where people and world are also very closely related to one another. The word world, olam, begins and ends with the two letters that spell the word am, people. The middle letters of olam is lo, him. Olam is sometimes explained to be am lo, he possesses, he has a people. But people and world go together in Hebrew. So what have we now explained so far? We just have one more to go. We explained the first three attributes of the heart, chesed, gvura, tiferet, loving kindness, might, and beauty, pertain to the correspondence theory of truth. Then the next two sefirot, which are active powers of action, which both have an element of pragmatism to them. Netzach and Hod. The Netzach is the pragmatic theory of truth, and Hod is the consensus theory of truth. Then the third of the second triplet of sefirot of the heart, which is Yesod foundation, that we explained last time, that's the coherence theory of truth. So it means that we now just have one more to go, which is Malchut. Malchut is kingdom. What theory of truth does that correspond to? How is it called? It's called social constructivism. The constructivist theory of truth, that truth is a social construction. You might think that social construction and consensus are the same thing, but they're not the same thing. It's two independent theories. Just to say that both words, constructivism, construction, and social, both of these words pertain to Malchut. Especially the word the essential word here is the construction. That truth is a construction. That's another simple word for construction. Truth is a building. Who builds truth? Society. Not only society, history. History, together with society, build this building which is called truth. It has many different chambers to it, and many different floors to it. And since it's a state of construction, you can continue to add another floor. Then you have to put in elevators to make sure that you can easily go up and down the floors. The truth is a construction. It's a social construction. This theory is used both in scientific philosophies of science, in sociology, in education, psychology, in almost every field. There's a branch of constructivism, of truth, of a truth system. The concept to construct something, in Hebrew to construct is binyan, to build, to construct, binyan. Where does that word apply in Kabbalah? It applies to Malchut. Malchut, kingdom has to be built. When do we build the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of Hashem? That's exactly what we're going to do another week on Rosh Hashanah. We have 10 days from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur to build Malchut. Binyan HaMalchut. How much does that phrase, Binyan HaMalchut, equal? The construction of Malchut, to build Malchut. It equals 613, which is the klalut, the entirety of all of the mitzvot, all the precepts of the Torah. It's our function, our task to construct Malchut. Because initially, Malchut is simply one point under the Yesod, one little point under the sefirot of Yesod. That the way we explain it now, the sefirot of Yesod is coherence. And Malchut initially, before we come and construct it, is just one little point that doesn't have dimensions to it. And we have to build it into a complete parzuf, from point to become a line, to become an area. And we do that primarily on Rosh Hashanah until Yom Kippur. What does that mean? It means that the consciousness of Hashem becomes universal, recognized universally. We coronate God on Rosh Hashanah. That coronation is the beginning and the essence of building the Malchut. That is the truth of Rosh Hashanah. That's why we begin Rosh Hashanah with this verse, Rosh Tevarcha. Tevarcha is Malchut. Your word is Malchut. And Rosh Hashanah, at the beginning, is truth. And the truth itself is the state of constructing the kingdom of heaven on earth. Rosh Hashanah, let's examine the term Rosh Hashanah. The head of the year. That phrase, that name of the holiday that we're about to enter, Rosh, let's calculate its Gematria. Rosh equals 501, Hashanah 360, meaning that Rosh Hashanah together equals 861. According to number theory, by number theory we means that numbers relate to different symmetric, geometric constructions, figures. This number is a triangle, means that the sum of all numbers from 1 to some number is the triangle of 41. Meaning that if I sum all numbers from 1 to 41, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, until 41, I get 861. Is there another very important phrase that equals exactly this number, 861? Yes, the phrase is Bet HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. On every holiday there were sacrifices brought to the Bet HaMikdash. The greatest amount of sacrifices were on the festival of Sukkot, the service in the temple. Why should Rosh Hashanah equal Bet HaMikdash? What is the greatest all-inclusive social construction of the Jewish people? As we said before, social construction is to build something, and it's building truth. The temple that either will descend, the third temple will either descend from heaven, fait accompli, or it will be constructed from below. Emet me'eretz titzmach, truth sprouts from the earth. And there's a way to synthesize these two opinions. So there is definitely a dimension in which we have to construct and build the Bet HaMikdash, even the third temple. According to the Rambam, it's clear that Mashiach, together with the whole Jewish people, has to construct the temple. To construct the temple symbolizes revealing, manifesting truth in the world. Meaning that now that we do not have a temple, we have faith. And in exile, the Jewish people retained its faith. We're connected to the Torah as much as we possibly can. But since we cannot fulfill everything that is written in the Torah, we're not true. We're not true to God. We're not true to the Torah. We're not true to ourselves. So this is also a most profound understanding. That for us, truth depends upon this physical construction, which is the temple. And spiritually, the time, the day of the year that we build the temple, which means that we build Malchut, is Rosh Hashanah, and that's why they both equal the same thing. Now, why is this number, this common number, that Rosh Hashanah equals Bet HaMikdash, Why is it the triangle of 41? And what does it have to do with emet? Emet, truth, is 441. It's 21 squared. It's also a figurative, most important figurative number. Truth. 21 is God's name, Eke, I shall be. I shall be that which I shall be. I shall be times I shall be equals truth. Implying there's also a process, an ongoing process of becoming. The truth is always becoming. I shall be that which I shall be. 21 is the midpoint of 41. The word truth is spelled Aleph, Mem, Tav. The two root letters are just the Aleph and the Mem. The Tav is a suffix letter, according to the Radak, as we explained last time. So truth itself, the word truth, a simple three-letter word, begins with Aleph Mem, which is 41. It has an additional Tav at the end. And by adding that Tav at the end, Tav is 400, is 20 squared. The 41 added to the 20 squared makes it into 21 squared. Why? What is the mathematical principle behind that? Just like there are triangular numbers, which means the sum of all numbers from 1 to n, how is a square number defined? It's the sum of all odd numbers from 1 to n plus 1. Beit HaMikdash is all numbers from 1 to 41. What about just taking the odd numbers from 1 to 41? 1 plus 3 plus 5 plus 7 plus 9 plus 11, 13, and up until 41. So you get 441. Emet. Means that emet in the mathematical, we'll call it the mathematical construct of Rosh Hashanah and Beit HaMikdash, the inner spine, we'll call it, is truth. If I add together all odd numbers from 1 to 39, what will I get? I'll get 20 squared, which is the Taf of Emet. But then I add the 41, which is the next odd number, which is the Aleph Mem of Emet, and I get 41 squared. I get 21 squared, which is from 1 to 41 odd numbers. But if I then add all the numbers 1 to 41, I get Rosh Hashanah and Beit HaMikdash. So that's a beautiful mathematical representation of the relationship between truth and Rosh Hashanah and Beit HaMikdash, which is call it the absolute, the ultimate construction of the Jewish people, which means the ultimate manifestation of truth in the world. So once more, without the Beit HaMikdash, we can have emunah, faith. But to transform the faith, our faith, into truth, even visible truth, what does it mean, visible truth? Just like we said before in the consensus theory, so we said that there are different worlds. So if you're a pluralist, then different worlds can exist simultaneously, and it's no big problem. But for us, we think that there is one truth. We'll speak about this. There are not many truths. Maybe we're narrow-minded, but nonetheless, in our narrow-mindedness, we believe that there's only one ultimate absolute truth. If there's a secular world, as we said before, the secular world does not believe in that world. Metaphysical reality does not play a part. What can change that secular viewpoint? What can convert, we'll say, what can convert that secular consensus to unite with a religious consensus? Only one thing: if the truth, that metaphysical reality is here, has to be totally, absolutely revealed on the physical plane. To the extent that no sane individual will not believe in the presence of what now is called supernatural phenomena. What does that is the Bet HaMikdash. And we pray for that, especially on Rosh Hashanah, when we coronate the king, and when we say Rosh Dvarcha Emet, at the beginning of your word, of your constructing your Malchut, your kingdom is truth. There are two more very important things about constructivism. One is that constructivism holds that we can never know reality per se as it is. We can only envision reality through the lens of a model that the society creates, through which to view reality. So this statement is also a most profound statement and very, very connected to us, because it says that truth is simply a model. What we construct is a model of reality. We can never perceive reality itself, but we construct a model, and the model in a certain way reflects our experiences and our sensations of reality. As soon as we say this, these are words taken from the philosophers. Now, this is all modern philosophy. As soon as I say that truth is a model of reality, but not reality itself, so that sounds to me exactly the same as the whole system that we try to teach and to think, to meditate, contemplate, just like we're doing right now, which is that we have been given by the wisdom of Kabbalah a certain model, and the model is a lens. It's exactly the same mentality, that we have a lens that works good on everything. That through this lens, through this model, we can see everything, and it all makes sense, and it all correlates to our experiences. And this is the best model there is. So we believe in the model. And the truth, once more, before we talked about who is the truth bearer, we said that we have to differentiate between the consensus theory and the constructionist theory. In the consensus theory, the truth bearer is the consensus, is the agreement. But in the construction theory, the truth bearer is the model, the paradigm. How was this said by Chazal, by the sages? This is called the difference between the way Moses merited to envision reality and the way the other prophets merited to envision reality. That Moses' prophecy is called Aspaklare Amira, it's called the transparent pain. That he saw things through a totally transparent pain. There is a pain, there is some pain, but the pain does not change the reality at all. He actually sees through the pain because it's totally transparent, and he sees reality as it is. But all the other prophets are not at that level of perception. They perceive reality only through the translucent pain, aspaklare de lo nahara. What is that translucent pain? The translucent pain is the model. In Kabbalah it's explained that all the other prophets, the prophesied with the word ko, so says Hashem, that word ko, so like, is Malchut. Only Moshe Rabbeinu is at the level of Tiferet that he sees things as Zed. This is the word of God, which is direct perception, transparent perception, and not translucent perception. So what does it mean? It means that this whole theory of constructivism, which we're now correlating to Malchut, is exactly as explained in Kabbalah, that Malchut is aspaklaria de lo naharas, the translucent pain. And that translucent pain, that lens through which we see the world, is the paradigm or the model that we construct. So this is another most important and profound thought. Together with this, once more these modern philosophers that hold by the constructivism, they say that the greatest example of a social construction of truth is the Copernican revolution. Regarding the solar system, whether it's geocentric or heliocentric. Now you might think that the change of perspective of the scientists was because the previous geocentric theory no longer worked. I mean, there was some flaw or error in the mathematics, in the experiments. No, at that time, the way Ptolemy saw the world as geocentric, and his mathematics, it was complex, but it worked. So, not that the previous theory fell apart mathematically or experimentally. Copernicus says that I see the world as heliocentric, the solar system. That the sun is in the center, and everything is revolving around the sun, not the earth. This is the classic example, according to these philosophers, of social construction of truth. Sounds a little bit weird. why did people, Copernicus had a hard time. He was pursued by the church and anybody who held by his opinions. He had to have Mesirus Nefesh at his time to hold by his opinion. But why did people, scientists, little by little begin to agree with him? So once more, the way that it's explained is not because the previous theory no longer worked. It was because a certain sense that this is the beginning of a new construction, a new model of realities that could begin to grow, just like an organism, and add new stories and floors on the beginning. And it's going to be very, very successful. Once more, a sense of the human mind that this theory is going to be much, much better, much more productive for science than the previous theory. This is considered to be the classic example of construction of truth. Does this sound like anything that we have heard of in the Torah? So this is amazing that this that we said, few people had that already know. This was explicit. This is the experience of the statement of the Heilige Ruzhin, Rabbi Yisrael Ruzhin, the great-grandson of the Maggid of Mezrich, of whom the Tzemach Tzedek and Chabad, the only Rebbe that he called him the Holy Rebbe. So once when one of his Hasidim came with tremendous enthusiasm and said that, Rebbe, I just read in some newspaper that the sun is in the middle of the universe, not the earth. What do you say about that? So he answered very calmly, calm, cool and collected. He answered, it all depends on what the tzaddikim of the generation desire. Whatever the tzaddikim say, that's the way it is, that's the way it goes. So this story, these words of the Heilige Ruzhin is exactly the statement that is made by these philosophers. Just for the philosophers, the tzaddikim, the righteous, are the scientists. Whatever they think is right, they're always, because it's a process, a historical process, and they think different from time to time. And whatever they think is right, that's what's right. That's the truth. That's exactly his words. So it must be that he was a social constructivist, the Ruzhin. It could be that every different tzaddik holds by a different theory of truth. But the Ruzhiner held by this theory of truth. The truth is simply what tzaddikim construct. What they say, what they have to say, that's the truth, that's the way it is. And obviously they have foresight, because they're chachomim, they're wise. Ezu chacham haroeh et hanolad. They see the future, as the philosophers say, that they had some foresight that the heliocentric view of the solar system is going to be much better, a much better model. It's all models. It's going to be a much better model than the previous model of the geocentric view of the solar system. And so after we went now through all of our different theories of truth, now the last First of all, we try to see a point of truth in each one of them, because if we're relating them to the sefirot, then obviously there's truth in each one of them. We also, especially in the last class, saw that there's a very close relationship between truth and goodness. Because before we were talking about what is good, now we're talking about what is true. So maybe just we'll say something about this, one more thing. There's one of the most important Torot teachings of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov is in Likutei Moran, Chelik Aleph, Nun Aleph, that everybody should look at. There he explains that there are four things which are absolute. What does it mean absolute? There's one and only one of them. And this, like we said before, that we definitely hold that truth, that there is absolute truth. And if everybody does not yet agree upon that absolute truth, so that's a problem that somebody has to solve. Either God has to solve that, or we have to solve that. Maybe both together we have to solve that. To create a universal consensus about truth. What are the four things that Rabbi Nachman says that are absolute? And since there are four things that are absolute, there must be an interrelationship between these four things. They are Kodesh, Emet, Tov, and Echad. Those are the four words. Sacred, true, good, and one. He explains that those things that are absolute, that there's no duality in them, all represent reality before the initial contraction of God's infinite light. They all come from a place, or they all reflect a place which is called Lifnei HaTzimtzum, before the initial contraction. He doesn't say the gematria, but there's a very explicit, beautiful gematria to support his thought that the very term itself, Lifnei HaTzimtzum, before the contraction, equals exactly emet, truth, which is one of the four, but is perhaps the most important of the four. So Lifnei HaTzimtzum, before the Tzimtzum, is truth. What does this mean just by itself for us? It means that to reach the truth, we ourselves have to return to a state of being which is before contraction. There are many ways to understand what contraction means. Before we said that people that are open-minded might be pluralistic, and people that are small-minded or narrow-minded might be just monistic. And now we're saying the exact opposite. That if you're in a state of contraction, which means a contraction of mind, then you have an affinity to pluralism. But if you're above or before contraction, before tzimtzum, then everything is one. Everything's absolutely one, everything is absolutely good, everything is absolutely holy, and everything's absolutely true. So those are the four words that he says are absolute before the tzimtzum. One of the ways that tzimtzum, that the contractions explain in Chassidus, is that it is binary logic. It's also a topic that we've discussed at length in other places. either yes, no, or either true, false. A statement is either true or it is false. That's binary logic. And that itself is contraction, to think in that way. I mean that the real truth is before that contraction, before that mentality of things are either right or wrong, or good or bad, or true or false. That's where the real truth is. Lifnei hatzimtzum. So since he has four different concepts, he says all are absolute before contraction. Well, now is the time that we have to do tshuva, to return. To return to where? Where do we have to return? Return is like going home. Where do we have to go to? We have to go to a place in our souls which is before contraction, before we became narrow-minded. For our own personal tzimtzum. And in that place, we reach a place where there's one absolute sacred reality, one absolute truth, one absolute good, one absolute oneness. Obviously, oneness is God. But God is also good, and God is also true, and God is also holy. It's all just four different flavors of God before contraction. So as we have these four different flavors of God before contraction, which is the root of our own soul, to which we have to return all these days of repentance, return, so there also must be some relation between these concepts. The sages teach us that before the creation of the world, which means before the contraction, he and his great name, his holy name, were one, alone. So perhaps Rabbi Nachman does not explain this, but it makes greater sense to say that since he has here these four concepts before the tzimtzum that are absolute, they must correspond to the four letters of the great name that is one with God before the contraction. So we'll just say in short how so. It's clear that the goodness, the most obvious one is the goodness. Absolute good. The goodness is a function of the heart of the midot. Even though now we're talking about before the initial contraction of infinite light, but there is, so to speak, kivyachol, a heart, God's goodness. And that's the Vav, that's the third letter of Hashem's name, the midot. Kodesh, sacred, what does sacred mean? Sacred in Hebrew means separate. It's totally, absolutely separate. It is always an idiom in the Zohar and Kabbalah for the sefirot Chokhmah, wisdom. Kodesh milah begameh is the term in Hebrew, that Kodesh is something by itself. It's alone by itself. Separate from everything else. That's the first letter of Hashem's name. What about the emet? So truth, I could also think that maybe truth is wisdom. No, truth begins, as we said before, truth begins with the letters Aleph Mem. What is Aleph Mem? M, mother. What is mother? Truth is a mother function, not a father function. How do I know that? The verse says, listen, my son, Shma b'ni Musa avich, to the chastisement of your father. Al titosh, do not leave the Torah of your mother. Torat imecha is truth. It says that Moses merited to binah. Hey, the first day of Hashem's name is mother, and it's understanding. Moses, who gives us the Torah, and is also called truth. Moshe emet v'Torah emet. Moses is true and his Torah is true. He merits the truth that he merits to receive from Hashem and to give to us is understanding. So the absolute truth of God before the initial contraction can be seen to correspond to the first hey of the great name that is one with him before the contraction, before the world is created. What remains? Remains only the word echad itself, one. What remains of the four letters of Hashem's name? Only the last letter, which is the final hey. So it must be that just like by a process of elimination, that word echad must pertain to Malchut. The final hey of Hashem's name is kingdom. What's more, it's the construction that we talked about. Building the kingdom. What is echad? Echad is the absolute integration of everything as one. When we say Hashem echad, the sages teach us that we have to think that God is one. We have to think of the letters of the word echad, that God is one in all the seven firmaments in the earth, which is chet. God is one as the first letter of echad, aleph. And he's one in 8 levels, 8 floors, 8 stories, 7 firmaments in the earth. That's the chet of echad. And he's also one in all of the expanse of the universe. It's called the four directions. Arba ruchot olam, which is the dalit of echad. What's more, echad is the integration of all of reality to be one construction. On Rosh Hashanah we say 10. We're going to now say 10 verses of Malchut, Eser Malchuyot, of coronating God as King of the universe. The final of the 10 is the verse that we say twice a day, the statement of our faith, which is the statement of what we believe to be the ultimate and absolute truth. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, God is our God, God is one. All of the other verses of Malchuyot have the word Melech, king, in the verse. But only this last one, which is the final verse, which is the seal of it all, doesn't explicitly have the word Melech in it. Where is Malchut in this verse? Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. So they say that this is a statement of the Gemara of Rabbi Yochanan. He says that it's in the word Echad, that the word Echad implies Malchut. That for Hashem to be one means that he is sovereign in all of creation, in all of reality. But oneness is sovereignty. Something to have to meditate upon. But this is explicit in the Gemara, and it applies now to Rosh Hashanah. To know when we say the Eser Malchuyot, that the ultimate Malchut, coronation of God, is Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. God is one, and God is one means that God is sovereign. So this helps us to understand these 4 concepts that Rabbi Nachman brings as being the 4 absolute states of being before the initial contraction, Lifnei HaTzimtzum. Kodesh, Emet, it's sanctity, truth, goodness, and oneness. Sanctity is wisdom, truth is understanding, goodness is compassion, and oneness is sovereignty. So with this we'll conclude. We still, Mitzvah Hashem, we still have a lot more about what is truth, and we'll leave that for the next class or the next classes. So we will all have a good and sweet year. For us, for all of Am Yisrael, for the whole world. The whole world should come to the real consensus, which is the consensus and the building of Malchut. The way we explain it now is Ihi Behod, that the construction theory is Malchut, and the consensus theory was Hod. And it says in Kabbalah that Malchut becomes Hod, meaning that the social construction becomes a universal consensus. As we said that in the construction theory, the truth resides on the model. But in the consensus theory, the truth itself resides on the consensus, on the agreement, which is itself we can call it a metaphysical reality that unites souls together. In fact, they agree with one another. So let's all agree to coronate Hashem. Once more, should be a good and sweet year.